Rise up, A-Town. It's the Falcons Squad. Sponsored by Game Time. Everything Atlanta Falcons every week. Breaking down all the big hits and game-changing plays from the ATL. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Straight from the ATL, the Falcons Squad Show starts now.
Welcome to the Falcons Squad Show, your home for the best Atlanta Falcons football talk. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me, our Falcons analyst, Jarvis Davis, and Locked On Falcons host, Aaron Freeman. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. The Falcons Squad Show is also part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So did the secondary sound off Friday night? We'll discuss. And did the second unit give you a sigh of relief? We'll download on that. Also, who are you penciling in to get past roster cuts? We'll discuss that too. But first, let's discuss whether or not there should be concern about 11. Raheem Morris said today the Falcons will move forward with an abundance of caution, quote unquote, with Jaylen Walker and his groin injury. He won't practice today, trying to ramp him back up later in the week, but it is about, quote, really getting him ready for the season because we don't want it to linger. Knowing the other soft tissue injuries Jaylen has dealt with really since the back part of his last season at UGA, are you concerned, Jarvis, about his readiness for week one?
Not really. Not at this moment, right? But you know, when we talked about this right after the game, I was like, oh yeah, I'm a little concerned about soft tissue, and now that they have a plan for how they're going to handle that, yes. I feel a little bit better about it because, you know, soft tissue injuries can linger if you don't, because essentially the only answer is rest. Like that's the only way you can do it, right? The only way you can attack that thing like that. It doesn't morph in getting better. So I think that, you know, Jaylen Walker should be fine. And my only thing is the level of expectations that he has on him, you know, and I thought I'm a part of that train too, you know, as far as what I'm expecting to see from him in his rookie season. I think that's what's going to hinder him. You know, just from, you know, because he's missing out on valuable reps. Like James has gotten a lot of snaps, and that's for a reason. And I think that you can see that the development piece is starting to come around as they ramp up for week one. But it just, I'm concerned as far as him missing out on reps and what he's going to be able to bring to the table early on in the season.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point that you make. Now that you know for sure that there's a plan, if you will, then it makes you a little bit more comfortable, coupled with the fact that you do have that 3 weeks where hopefully Jaylen Walker can get the rest that he needs. His body can get the rest that it needs so that it's ready for week one. And Tori, you were there this morning. Tori, of course, our senior Falcons reporter, joining us live from Flowery Branch. You were there at the press conference this morning. What kind of tone and timbre maybe did you pick up when Raheem was talking about Jaylen Walker, just in terms of where he is now and maybe where you feel his readiness might be come the season opener?
I think it's pretty similar to, I think, how Raheem has been through this whole thing, where he's kind of been like, we're not concerned about it. Like, we feel fine about it. We're just having this abundance of caution, like using all of those words that Raheem has used before. I don't have any reason to believe otherwise, because I thought what Jaylen Walker did last week against the Tennessee Titans was notable. I thought he had a good week. I thought he had some good reps. I thought he looked good in some one-on-one settings, even though I know there's this one clip circling around, people being like, oh no, Jaylen Walker gets beat, whatever. Like, so does everybody. Like, so I'm not like overly concerned at this point. I think that it's honestly, when we're looking at where he is come week one, until I get the sense that like Raheem is worried about it, I'm not going to be worried about it, especially him saying like, we're not worried about it. He hasn't said that yet about someone like Darnell Mooney. He has not said that yet about someone like Storm Norton, where he's like, oh, we're not concerned. Like, we definitely feel good about having him back week one. That's not what he said about some of those guys. So the fact that he's sitting there saying that about Jaylen Walker, I'm like, okay, cool. Like, I'm not too concerned.
Yeah. And Aaron, it's interesting what Tori mentions, because definitely different set of injuries and circumstances as it relates to Matthew Stafford and Jaylen Walker. But the reason I was asking Tori about that tone and timber is because on one of my shows yesterday, we talked about the tone and timber of Sean McVay changing from like a Monday to a Saturday as far as Matt Stafford and his status and his readiness and availability now and for week one. So I wanted to kind of ask Tori, like, what did she feel? What did she get a sense of? Because now there is great concern about Matthew Stafford's readiness coming out of Rams camp. But that said, where are you as far as your comfortability with Jaylen Walker, the progress he's making, the plan that Raheem Morris has in place for him?
I'm a little concerned. But it's mostly just because, as you said, T at the top, like this has been a consistent issue throughout this offseason with soft tissue injuries with Jaylen Walker. And it's like, these things haven't gone away, and it's like, okay, until they go away. So I'm only a little concerned, like, on a 10-point scale, I'm at probably like a 3 in terms of that. But it's a similar conversation that we had, at the beginning of training camp when Darnell Mooney went down, and it's like, oh, he'll be back. And it's like, I'll worry about that when we get to that Wednesday before week one, I believe September 3rd, and the Falcons have to release an injury report. And if Jaylen Walker's on that as a limited participant with some soft tissue issue, then I'll be a little bit more concerned about it than I am currently right now. But I think right now, Raheem Morris and company, as Tori laid out, deserve the benefit of the doubt at this point in time, where if he's going to be practicing this week, I don't think he'll probably play this week, but we'll see on that. If he practices this week and then you have a couple of weeks between now and the start of the regular season, that's plenty of time, hopefully, for him to get back to 100% for September 7th in that Bucs week one game. So I'm a little concerned just because this problem hasn't gone away yet, but it certainly could go away in the next couple of weeks.
Indeed. And Jarvis, one of the other things we talked about last week was whether or not we would or even should see Kirk Cousins under center. Were you surprised he didn't play Friday? Do you think he should have?
No, not really. Because when you think about, Kirk's a vet, and if he gets in there and had any type of time to throw the football, we know that he was going to be capable because, he's 100%, as far as we know, in camp, and he's looked good when he's had time behind that second offensive line. So, given how that offensive line played in the pass pro, I thought they did a better job, as far as protecting the quarterback. But, there still was some issues in the run game. But, I don't think that, Kirk is in the stage where he needs to go out there and prove himself. And so being that that's the case, as long as he's healthy, I feel like the Falcons know what they need to know about him at this point.
Just to play devil's advocate, I don't think that it's the Falcons that need to know what Kirk Cousins is. I think it's other teams in the league that kind of need to be put on notice as to how healthy he is, how he's doing. Because the last time out, this is somebody who was not making the right decisions, did not look healthy. He goes on, Netflix and says that he wasn't healthy. So I think that if you are another team in the league and something happens and you're like questioning what Kirk Cousins' status is, if he were to go out and, I'm not saying that means like play him for a full quarter in the preseason. That's not what I'm saying. But I think it would have been nice to at least have some live looks at Kirk Cousins as a potential tradable asset down the road, to be like, hey, look, guys, he's healthy. He's ready to go. Like everything that happened in November, forget about it. Like he looks like that guy in October. Like, I think that is like, to me, like that's kind of where my head is as to why you would try and play him in the preseason. Again, though, he is a 13-year vet, so you could kind of say, well, everything he's done up to this point, like, perhaps you kind of take that for what it is. I get that. But just to kind of play devil's advocate a little bit, like the last time we saw Kirk, I don't know how many people would be like itching to get him on another roster. So that would be my one argument.
No, Tori nailed it. It was we talked about this on Thursday's Falcon Squad before the game, where it's like it's a risk reward, right? The risk is if you play Kirk and he doesn't look good, that pretty much kills any potential trade market you could have for Kirk in the future. And if he looks great, then it potentially creates a trade market that right now doesn't really exist at this point in time. And so the Falcons had to kind of weigh the risk reward of like, are we going to get the reward? Like, is Kirk going out there with the second string players going to lead to Kirk balling out this against the Titans for 1 or 2 series? And again, maybe it could have happened, but like, I'm not surprised that the Falcons were like, we're chasing something that is probably not going to happen. So what's the point? And so, it wasn't a shock to me that Kirk didn't play on Friday. At the beginning of the week, I was like, oh, there's no chance Kirk's playing. And then as we got in the week, it's like, maybe there's a chance. And then by the time we got to Friday, I was like, yeah, I don't think Kirk's going to play. Because it's just like going out there, and no offense to the David Sillses and the Dylan Drummonds and Jack Nelsons of the world, but it was just like, I don't know if you're putting Kirk in a situation playing with those guys for 8 snaps or whatever it would have wound up being, that is going to put him in a position where he can do the thing that Tori was just talking about, which is go out there and play great football. And all of a sudden people are like, hey, that Kirk Cousins, hey, maybe we should give the Falcons a phone call and
carving him up.
Yeah, let's see what's going on with Kirk.
Get a little taste of that Kirko.
You get this incredible quarterback that hasn't forgotten how to play quarterback. Like, it just didn't seem like that was likely given the circumstances. So it wasn't a shock to me that the Falcons were like, you know what why are we chasing this? Just keep it moving.
Speaking of QBs, the Falcons announced today that they signed Ben DiNucci, waived injured Emory Jones, who's in the concussion protocol, and they also released wide receiver DJ Chark. So not surprised by the QB signing after Jones' injury in Friday's game, Jarvis, but were you surprised by the release of Chark?
No, not at all, because when you think about the rotations and what is at stake right now, Darnell Mooney is hurt. He was brought in to be a camp body. Easton Stick vouched for him, and Terry Fontenot listened. And hey, bring him in. We got an injury. We need an X wide receiver. Need an X receiver. So let's bring him in. But all you've heard since Chark has come in, oh man, Casey Washington, he's just been that guy. He's been able to step in. He's got some good chemistry with Michael Penix. He didn't dress out, in the game. So it's just like, hey man, 82 sitting real pretty right now. Like, you don't have to worry about the Grim Reaper coming around and giving him a pink slip, once it's cut down time. So I think that, when you have a guy that's been a journeyman in this league, and you understand the physical traits and see those once he walks out on the field and puts on a uniform, but you have guys who've been in the system who are young and cheap, and there are guys that you brought in. Those guys are always going to trump those guys that you bring in off the street.
Yeah. And what about you, Tori, when you look at the decision for the release of DJ Chark? Were you surprised? Do you think that was the right call?
I think it was the right call, because I do think, to Jarvis's point, it's like you kind of see the writing on the wall of who is going to make this 53-man. And honestly, I don't think that DJ Chark was even close to the pecking order of even, being in competition with some guys to have that 6th or 7th spot at that position group. So I think because of that, someone with the name recognition of DJ Chark, I think if he were to be like, hey, I think I could probably go get another opportunity somewhere else. I feel like he's someone with connections, with enough proven experience that could potentially be the case at play here as well. That he's a bit like, hey, let me go see if there's another roster that I can make. I know kind of I'm not cutting things here. So that's to me what this move signifies. And I think honestly, it's probably a do right by both parties. The Falcons being like, hey, we don't really see you on this 53-man, and DJ Chark being like, yeah, no, me neither. Let me go find a 53-man I can't be a part of.
Yeah. And I think you're right, Tori. Aaron, it just kind of felt like as we're approaching the second game of the preseason, DJ Chark was going to be the odd man out.
Yeah, I mean, Jarvis nailed it, where we've been talking about Casey Washington in the practices and how good he's looked in that sort of X role with Darnell Mooney down. And then in the games, who are we talking about? Chris Blair. He's been playing that X role in the games primarily, and he's been balling out in the games. And so DJ Chark was kind of buried behind both of those guys, and there was really no opportunity for him to potentially make the roster at this point in time. And as Tori said, like, he'll have an opportunity at this point to catch on with another team. I know one of the things that he said, he was close to retirement as well before trying to get back here in Atlanta to see if he's got one more shot here. So that also gives him an opportunity to do that if he is done with football, as he appeared to be close to earlier this spring. So, the options are available for DJ Chark, whatever he wants to wind up doing. But as everybody else said, I don't think he was going to be on the Falcons roster come September.
Yeah, and that's the thing about, with DJ Chark being in that particular situation. I go back to when he was talking when he first got signed. He was talking about how his daughter has lived in 4 or 5 different cities, and he was just like, man, oh no, that doesn't sound like a guy who's motivated to get going, because like when you start putting things in perspective like that, you just like, oh man, maybe it's time for me to hang it up. So, now Grant, I think you made a great point, Tori, as far as him seeing what he can catch on somewhere else, but I would not be surprised at all if he's the guy to say, you know what, it's been 6-7 years since I've been in this league. Probably give me a nice little retirement, let me go ahead and get settled down somewhere so I can kind of, continue to build my family and move on in that aspect of it. So I think that's one of those things where you kind of say, okay, here's where we are. And one thing I always respected about Terry and his front office is the fact that he's a guy that's going to be pretty straightforward with those guys. And a lot of times when you have veterans like that, those guys are always going to appreciate you. Even if it's something that they don't want to hear, they're always going to appreciate, you being honest in those particular situations.
Indeed. So when we come back, we'll talk about the secondary and whether or not they sounded off Friday night when we take it under further review. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of the year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. So maybe, just maybe, the squad show is going to tap in and play Yahoo Fantasy. And you should too, whether you're a first timer or a veteran making your millionth league. One of the features that you might want to check into is the new Guillotine Leagues they just dropped. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout August. To kick it off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, which is a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're more into the classics, you can still play in head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. So stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnFootball. Locked On NFL, that is. All right. So, Tori, we started our combo post-game Friday on the squad show about how Jeff Ulbrich employed certain players. Didn't get to discuss how the secondary fared for the Falcons defense. So let's talk about it here in terms of the play of Xavier Watts at safety, D. Alford at nickel, or even the secondary room overall. What were your thoughts?
So I think for me, it all stems from Natrone Brooks. I think that he is somebody who has had a fantastic camp. He's somebody who I kind of penciled in as a bubble player going into this camp, and he has emerged as, I think, someone who is going to make this 53-man roster, and not only going to make this 53-man roster, but somebody who I believe is working as the third cornerback off the bench. Last week during joint practices, they actually were simulating what happens if AJ Terrell or Mike Hughes were to go down, be injured, whatever the case, need to be pulled for whatever case may be. And it was Natrone Brooks who was the next guy up, the next man in. And he got some work opposite Mike Hughes. He got some work opposite AJ Terrell. So I think that for me, he's kind of been the storyline of camp. And, of course, then he has on Friday night the big interception with the pressure by James Pierce off the edge, and Contavia Street just pushing the guard into the lap of the quarterback. And so I think he's been kind of this really bright spot in camp. He's somebody that even when I was talking to Caden Ellis like weeks ago, And Caden Ellis is like, Jeff Ulbricht's whole mantra is heart, mind, fist. And somebody who embodies that is Natrone Brooks. Like, and he said that unprompted. It wasn't like I said, hey, how's Natrone Brooks doing? It was, he brought that up on his own. So to me, he's he's the story of the secondary through camp and the preseason. And it's one of those things that while he's been the story of camp, I think the underlying part of it, the part that you don't necessarily want to look too closely in like the realization of is that Clark Phillips is getting buried on the 53-man roster. And it's actually, I've been playing around with my 53-man roster for the last 2 weeks, and I'm just having a really hard time. Like, him not being healthy, him kind of falling down the depth chart. Like, it's really going to be interesting to see what the Falcons do with someone like him, someone like Carlos Washington. I know these Storm Norton, like some of these injured guys who have played key roles in depth for this 53-man roster in years past. Like, we haven't seen them. And there are some other guys in the same way that Natrone Brooks is, like Nathan Carter, stepping up to fill in some of these roles. So I do not envy coaches in front office with this 53-man roster, because I know I'm having trouble pinning down exactly what this looks like. And someone like Natrone Brooks, like as an example in the secondary, is someone who has really changed things for himself.
Absolutely. And Aaron, for you, when you kind of take a step back and you look at the secondary's performance overall Friday night, kind of what stood out to you? And I think Tori makes a great point. Like, Natrone Brooks always starts the conversation when it comes to standouts.
Yeah. It's been interesting watching the secondary so far in this preseason, because outside of Natrone Brooks, like, there hasn't been sort of those standout moments for really anybody. You're not seeing, the pass breakups and the interceptions and sort of those splashy plays that you come to expect from a lot of these guys, particularly the rookies like Xavier Watts and Billy Bowman. I thought both of those guys did good work on Friday night against Tennessee. Like, I know one of the things that Jarvis wanted to see from Xavier Watts was him being a little bit more aggressive or less hesitant when it came to his run fits. I thought he was able to do that, but you didn't really get like that one moment where it's like, oh, he was able to, break up a pass over the middle or something like that. And the same thing with Billy Bowman, like probably his most splashy play was kind of like blowing up a block on a screen pass or something like that. And it's like, other than that, like, he was solid, like nothing major, nothing negative to write home about, nothing, super positive to write home about. And so, like, it is kind of been the Natrone Brooks show for that reason, because he's the one guy that's making all the sort of splashy plays. But I think overall the secondary, for the most part, was better. Like, D'Alford, I thought, was better this week after a rough game the previous game. So overall, I think the secondary is doing solid, but we just don't get the sexy splashy plays outside of the Brooks sexy splashy plays.
Yeah, and outside of Jarvis, DeMarco Hellens reminding us in game 1 that he was a hitman. But
Oof, Lord, oh my gosh, man! Like, this is the beauty of preseason, right? People are talking about, oh, preseason don't mean anything. This is the beauty of preseason. You got a guy in Natrone Brooks who Free has deemed him the preseason superstar, right? Like, he had an excellent preseason last year. Did not make the final 53, but he was able to get onto the active roster, after the season started. So, but now we're talking about him making the 53 straight out. Talking about the progression, the coaching, the having that plan. Like, I'm gonna be giving coaching kudos, y'all. Like, well, what we talking about here. This is good stuff. I so enjoy guys like Natrone Brooks getting the opportunity, right? Because someone gets hurt. Clark Phillips gets hurt. Wasn't really doing too much when he was out there anyway. And now Tori talking about how he's the first sub if a guy gets hurt. That's big time stuff right there. Like, I absolutely love him taking advantage of this opportunity. And as far as Billy Bowman goes, I kind of pencil him as that starter, a rookie who can come in and start almost right away in that secondary. D'Alford got something to say. I mean, I ain't saying the man was amazing, but there was a lot of sticky coverage. Sometimes I thought they were going to throw the flag, but they didn't. So, hey, you can't can't call it what it ain't, right? So hey, that's good coverage right there. So and I think that D is stepping up to all the chatter, right? Because he understands. Hey, they moved that man to play my position. So, he was a safety coming out of college. So like he understands the writings on the wall. He only got a 1-year deal, so he gets it. He understands it. So, and I like what I'm saying. Like this is what a true training camp battle is all about, right? With like guys just going after it. Every time they get an opportunity, they just going after it and doing what they're supposed to do. So yeah, this is one of those battles where I'm just like, yep, we're gonna keep our eye on this one. We're gonna see how it works. I'll be very interested to see how much playing time either one or both these guys get on Friday against the Cowboys.
Indeed. And Tori, we also didn't get to talk about this, so it's fresh for us from Friday night as well. And that is the play of Rukaroro and Brandon Dorlus in the interior. What were your thoughts on how they played?
I thought they played well. I was very, especially Brandon Dorlus. I think he's somebody who has had a really good camp, really establishing himself as someone who Falcons can rely upon in that interior. This was always going to be a really important training camp and preseason for someone like Brandon Dorlus, specifically because he didn't have a lot of snaps last year. He didn't have a lot of time. He didn't really fit into the rotation, and now he's a pretty active and important part of it. And so I think that I see a difference in his confidence level. I see a difference in the way he's kind of getting after guys. I like the way that Jeff Ulbrich is using him both as a true traditional interior guy, but also a little bit as a big end and having that big end look. I kind of always thought that was going to be Zach Harrison's role, but they've really morphed Brandon Dorlus into being more of that guy. I think they really like Zach Harrison in the interior. So far, I like what I'm seeing from Brandon Dorlus. He's been a fun player to cover this preseason. And I'm really looking forward to seeing kind of what he actually does come regular season when he's getting a consistent amount of reps.
Yeah. I would say I thought Dorlus had a really strong opening drive in that third quarter where like a lot of the big plays, both as a run defender and pass rusher, came in. With Rook, I think he was a guy that, Rook is solid because like Rook doesn't make the splashy sort of sexy plays that I think, others make, but like he just is just consistently doing his job. And that's kind of what you're hoping from Rook, or at least I'm hoping from Rook. I know other people may be hoping a little bit more from him, but like to me, that would be a good first full season for Rukaroro as opposed to last year he did get some playing time, but this is kind of his rookie year. And so coming into the league and just like, hey, just do your job. I know there's a big expectation that he's going to sort of fill the shoes of Grady Jarrett. And I'm like, I don't know if we should be putting those expectations on him. So I'm just like, just do your job. And I think Rook consistently has been able to do that. I think Dorlus, you've seen the flashes, particularly as a pass rusher. And I think on Friday, he got to show off his run stopping capabilities. But I think because of the pass rushing abilities that he's shown so far, it's kind of made some other veteran players that are a little bit more experienced feel a little bit more expendable. The Morgan Foxes of the world, the Kentavious Streets of the world, guys that were known for being better pass rushers than run defenders. It's like, whoa, we got this young up and coming guy that's also kind of fits that boat. And it's like, are we going to keep these guys around that are going to prevent him from getting those opportunities this year? So I think that's going to be a question the Falcons going to have to answer by the end of training camp and when final cuts happen. But I think so far these two young players have shown progress from a year ago, from what they were able to do in the preseason, not necessarily the regular season because they didn't get to play the regular season. But I think both of these guys, the arrow is pointing up for both of them.
Yeah, and I want to take it. I know you asked about Rukaroro and Brandon Dorlus, but I want to take time out to highlight what I've been seeing from Zach Harrison. I feel like he's been like in the first preseason game, he showed some pass rush ability. I think this game right here, you really showed what he can be as a run stopper, specifically going up against guards in that base 3-4 that they run in early downs. Like the length, man, it's so. It's going to be hard for guards to handle him. That's why, because being the fact that he's so long that a lot of times you put guys like that out on the edge because those tackles normally have the longest arms on the offensive line, right? So it's kind of like an even matchup. But when you get him down there in the trenches over that guard and on rundown situations, it's almost lock out. Let me get rid of him, and I can be able to see over the offensive lineman and do what I need to do. And you saw that several times, and I was very pleased with what I saw with him against the run game. And you're going to need things like that because that was a concern. They had the Tennessee Titans popped a couple runs and specifically right up the middle, and you start to see the adjustments, towards the midway through the game. You start to see 96 in there, crashing down inside. As soon as that running back makes a move, hold what you got until you do it, from a two-gapping standpoint, and then you go do what you need to do to make that play. So, yeah, I think, Dorless, I echo what Tori said. The man has had a hell of a camp. Like, Dorless has been really proving himself like, hey, man, don't forget about me as a two-way player, not necessarily in one specific, so as a two-way player, he's kind of shined. So, yeah, I think the Falcons are really lining themselves up, not necessarily to replace one player because Grady, that's a whole different piece. But I think that they are getting several guys that can come in and kind of keep it going and and probably be a little bit better because you're not depending on one person to go out there and make plays.
More defense talk when we get back. This episode of our Falcon Squad show is brought to you by BetterHelp. These days, feels like there's advice for everything: cold plunges, gratitude journals, screen detoxes, but who do you know and what actually works for you? With so much information online about mental health and wellness, it can be overwhelming to figure out what's true and what will actually help. That's where talking to a licensed therapist through BetterHelp can make all the difference. You get real, personalized guidance instead of just guessing based on something you saw on social media. I found that therapy and coaching isn't just for navigating major challenges. It's also about building positive coping skills and learning how to set boundaries, and having a trusted professional to talk to things through with can help cut through the noise and keep you focused on what matters most. So talk it out with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. With over 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, serving more than 5 million people. So check out betterhelp.com/lockedon and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. So Jarvis, we of course saw the newly signed Ronnie Harrison get some work in at inside linebacker. So we want to start with him, and we'll talk about another signing just in a moment. But Raheem Morris had indicated that that's the spot where the Falcons wanted to use him. So how do you feel he did?
I thought he did fine. I thought he did a fine job because, like, when you think about reasoning for him coming in, like, you got to think about, okay, I need some bodies to play inside linebacker because I've maybe seen enough from JD Bertrand. I don't want him playing in that third game, and you want to be able to maneuver those guys around a little bit, and maybe potentially be able to keep him around if we really like what we see, and we don't want to maybe want to move on from D'Angelo Malone. I'm not saying that's going to be the case, but I'm just saying, given a scenario as far as how the front office may be thinking when they're talking about bringing guys in to play certain positions. So I thought he did a fine job. Like, yeah, he gave up the touchdown against Gunnar Helm, but that was pretty doggone good coverage. I felt like Helm just made a heck of a play, even with Jordan Fuller on the top of him. So it was a really good throw, really good catch. So, hey, it's not more you can ask for when you're in his hip pocket like that. So, yeah, I thought he did a solid job.
And what about you, Free? Were you pleased with, or was it satisfactory, Ronnie Harrison's performance Friday night?
Yeah, I was. I completely forgot about him giving up that touchdown just because I just like, that's just a heck of a throw and a heck of a catch. Like, that didn't even go against him. When I was like breaking down the game for my Locked On Falcons insiders over the weekend, because I didn't even factor that in. I was just like focused on all the other things that he was doing. I thought he did other things well. He was aggressive when it came to fitting the runs and whatnot. And he's channeling. He was DeMarco Hellams before DeMarco Hellams was at Alabama. That guy that was just going to run around, I'm going to hurt people, and he's brought that mentality to the linebacker position that kind of makes him a natural playing in the box. And I thought you got to see that on display on Friday night when it came to some of his run fits and whatnot. And so I think, given the circumstances, he did as good a job as you could expect. And, going into it, it was kind of like, okay, well, they just needed a body just because they have so many linebackers down with Troy Anderson, Malik Verdon, and J.D. Bertrand dealing with his injuries. And obviously Caden Ellis and Devon Diablo not playing reps. But I thought he played well enough and did enough good things that I think he could potentially be more than a body if he could go out there on Friday against the Dallas Cowboys and put together another solid performance for this team. So certainly was impressed with what Ronnie Harrison was able to do on short notice.
Okay. And speaking of that, we talk about that free all the time, whether or not there are guys added to this roster who are going to be substantive or who are essentially going to be bodies. So we found out this morning, according to the Schultz report, that the Falcons are signing former Patriots and Broncos edge rusher Ronnie Perkins. So what are your thoughts on that Perkins signing, Jarvis?
James Pierce Jr. might not play. Jaylen Walker is not going to play. Braylon Trice might not play. You need somebody to go out here. Like, they need bodies. All of these signings are right here like, hey, big heads, come on down here and get you some film. You know what I'm saying?
Big head is playing in my head, free. I'm just saying. Oh, goodness. Come on.
We got all the film you need. You know what I'm saying? Whatever film you need, we got it right here waiting just for you. So yeah, no shade, you know what I'm saying? But hey, this is what it is. Like, this is how this thing works, because the Falcons are basically saying that, hey, our roster is set and we need some people to fill 4 quarters. So if you want to come up here and get your get your little stipend and go ahead and play in the game and get you some tape, you know what I'm saying? So you can send out to all the 31 other teams. Hey man, by all means, go ahead. So yeah, this is exactly what this is. And like I said, it might be an opportunity because you never know.
Yeah, it's the same conversation where it's like he's coming in to be a body, right? The Falcons have talked about how, you're gonna get 4 snaps and then you're gonna be off the field. Not on Friday night. You might get 36 snaps before you get a break with some of these guys.
Not 4, but 40, right? Free.
So it's one of those things where it's like they are looking for bodies at this point in time, but there is opportunity, as we just talked about with Ronnie Harrison, where it's like, if you can go out there and make some flash plays, not only could you impress the Falcons, where it's like, you're probably not going to make the roster, but certainly you're going to be on speed dial for potentially the practice squad. Potentially if there's an in-season injury or whatever, that's an opportunity for you, as well as what Jarvis is breaking down, where it's like somebody else may be like, hey, we saw Ronnie Perkins do some things, after 3 days of practice. What could he do if we get him in our building for 3 weeks, and what could he be doing in our building? Especially for a player like Ronnie Perkins, who his career kind of got derailed early on because of injuries, right? And never really got that opportunity. So this is a golden opportunity to basically say, hey, I was a 3rd round pick for a reason. And I can go out there and show that on Friday night against the Cowboys, and maybe makes a couple splash plays. And that allows other teams or the Falcons to be like, hey, there's something here. So that's really what, we call them bodies in the sense of like, oh, they're probably not going to make the Falcons roster, but it doesn't mean that there aren't opportunities that they can exploit and be able to land a spot on somebody else's roster.
Yeah, indeed. Well, Jarvis, you hinted at it a little bit earlier, but let's go back to it and deep dive just a little bit more on the O-line. That second unit has been on the struggle bus, to say the least. Do you feel like they did anything to redeem themselves Friday night, especially maybe in the second half?
Yeah, I thought, like, specifically, I'll be specific as far as with Jovan Gwynn. I thought there were he had some bad moments. I feel not necessarily bad. Let me say that. Let me take that back. He had some moments where you were kind of questioning as to whether or not he could be the backup center, right? Specifically in the run game, because we know that's the foundation of what this offense is going to be. If they're going to be successful this year, they're going to be able to run the football. And if you can't get to that next level in that zone scheme and cut that play side linebacker off, Like he can't be in the game. It's just not going to work like that. So I thought that he showed a little bit better, a little bit more promise. And I think that he had some really nice plays in pass pro too. Like just seeking in, because one thing I always look for when it comes to center is a lot of times they are uncovered, right? Like the more we see teams in nickel, that means it's 4 pass rushers. So more than likely that you're not going to be covered in those particular situations. So what I look for in centers nowadays is that seek and destroy type situation. Like, all right, no one's now up over me, so let me go help out my teammate, who might be struggling, Kyle Hinton. So, help him out. Like he's seeking and destroying. Like there was a really play that I'm sure he got a +4 in Dwayne Leffert's grading system. So yeah, I like what I saw from him in that aspect of it. But I think overall, they popped some plays. You had the Nick and Carter touchdown run. That's a good sign. That's progress. So yeah, I think overall though, there was progress, and they didn't regress. So any gress that's pro, it's a good one. I'm just putting
Love it
right now.
Hey man, you want to make up words because you're a little bit more pleased with the backup unit for the O-line? Do you, man? Whatever makes you happy. Because hey, Free, anytime we can have a positive conversation or any positive communication about this second unit on the offensive line is a good thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't go so far as to say that they redeemed themselves, but as Jarvis said, I do think they took a step forward, and so we will
towards redemption.
We will take one step forward. Hey, we'll take that. We'll take that at this point, based off what we saw last week against the Lions. So, I thought Kyle Hinton and Jack Nelson struggled out the gates. They made some mistakes. Amen. I thought again, I'm not going to say the word redeem themselves, but I did think they did some positive things later in the game. Yes. They were kind of the two guys that had the key block on that Nathan Carter touchdown, where they were able to get to the second level and seal that out. And then Carter, breaking a tackle, and then it was off to the races for him. And so to have those plays on tape, even if it's one play that stands out, it's like, hey, it's one more than they had last week. So, hey, maybe against the Cowboys, we might get 2 of those positive plays. We might take another step forward. So the trending is in the right direction. It may not be at the pace and progress that we want it to be at this point with the second string offensive line, but it is improvement at this stage. And so we will take what we can get. I often say, it's funny, with the Falcons, historically, when we talk about the pass rush, beggars cannot be choosers. And now we're choosing. We can sit here and choose. We can choose not to trade for Trey Hendrickson, as opposed to before, where we didn't have that option now because of what we believe in the pass rush. And now it's like, okay, well, that beggars can't be choosers line is kind of morphing to the offensive line depth at this point in time. So, we'll take what we can get at this stage with the second string offensive line. So again, it's progress. It's not great, but it's something. So we'll take it.
I think we are all in agreement that maybe special teams is a happier place, and they have. And I, of course, talking about JD, the redemption tour from last season and what we saw with special teams overall, seems like they're still on their redemption tour this season. Special teams had a nice night Friday. Tegan Quatoriano entered the chat with a forced fumble that he also recovered. But who and what kind of stood out to you the most from the special teams unit?
We talked about this going into this game about how, Younghoe Koo can kind of like solidify his starting spot. And I was just like, he pretty much already stamped it essentially. And Raheem Morris pretty much backed that up by saying, hey, there's a sentimental type connection there. And like, yeah, Koo is he's all good. He's healthy. And because that was the only question, right? Because we are, and I know people, remember that Saints post-game show, you know what I'm saying? And I was calling for some heads, or specifically one, his number is number 6. And I was just like, hey, man, it's time to go, move on. Well, call somebody on the street, come get it, because, like, you can't be losing games for a kicker. Like, I'm just sorry. But, it's good to see that he's healthy. It's good to see that I have a sense of calmness when he comes out on the field. That seems to be back. because we know that, hey, once Koo runs out there and all you hear the crowd saying Koo, and you see that bad boy go between the uprights, that's what we're used to seeing, right? So, and I feel like we've seen that in practice and in the game as well. So, when you have your kicker basically coming back saying, hey, man, I'm 100%, you can't ask for more than that.
Yeah. And Raheem Morris spoke about that this morning, Aaron, because he just acknowledged that, hey, quote unquote, you never want to say a competition is over as it relates to that kicking competition between Younghoe Koo and Lenny Craig. But then he noted that Koo has a lot of emotional attachment, if you will. So although we don't know for sure he's not been named the starter, we do know that even dating back to last season, it was clear Raheem Morris was going to ride. I don't want to say die, but ride with Koo regardless.
Yeah. And basically, unless we start hearing that Koo's shanking kicks in practice this week, like I think it's safe to assume that this competition is a wrap. And Raheem's not the only one that had emotional investment. I got emotional investment just because of the arguments me and Jarvis were having last year on Locked On Falcons about this whole situation. And so I was a little nervous going out there in those first kicks on Friday night, being like, man, I really need Koo to make these kicks because I cannot have Jarvis throwing this back in my face at this point in time. So I very much have
me? I would do something like that.
Yeah, you would. Jarvis. You've been waiting the whole time. You've been waiting for 8 months or whatever for this to be like, well, look who's Lenny Krieg, all that, So I very much was happy to see Koo make those kicks on Friday night. Bradley Pinion had himself a game. Tegan Quatoriano had himself a game. Tegan Quatoriano was a guy that was known for his blocking ability, not his special teams ability. And to go out there and I believe it was the report was his first time on kickoff coverage ever to force a fumble. I'm like, okay, my friend, you just
and recovery too.
You're on the team. So we won't see Tegan Quatoriano on Friday against the Cowboys. You're good. We're good to go. You checked that box. So I think the special teams was the strength. If there's one positive that you could take away from Friday night's loss against the Titans, it's like, hey, special teams looking real good at this point in time. So I think that was one of the things that stood out on Friday night.
Yeah. Well, I'll be petty and I'll say while Younghoe Koo made a 42-yarder Friday night, Lenny Craig made a 60-yarder this morning at practice free. Just saying, maybe the competition isn't over just yet. Speaking of that, we'll talk about our winners and losers from Friday night and who we might be penciling in to get past roster cuts in the look ahead. All right, Aaron. So I know we talked about some of our winners and losers, some of the guys who hit for us, some who missed against the Tennessee Titans Friday night. But when you think about it, and this can be offense, defense, or special teams, let's talk about who hit for you against Tennessee Friday night.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's kind of the conversation when you ask me like who won. It's like, are we now sitting here saying you're on the team? You're on the team right now. And so for me, on defense, the obvious answer to me is Natrone Brooks. In terms of special teams, like if you want to say Younghoe Koo, if that was a question, you could say that. But again, going back to that Tegan Quatoriano point where it was like he was kind of the front runner at that third tight end spot because of his blocking ability. And that's a position where last year with Ross Dwelley in that role, he's spent more snaps on special teams than he did on offense. And so you need to be able to show that you can do something on that third phase of the game. And Quatoriano was able to do that. So it's like, okay, if it was any doubt on who's going to be the third tight end for the Falcons, I think he was able to erase those doubts. It was hard to sort of look at the offense and say, yeah, there was one guy that absolutely won. If I was to pick between two, I would pick David Sills, the wide receiver, and then Nathan Carter, the running back. I don't know if Nathan Carter won a roster spot, but I certainly think he's now the front runner. He's leaped to the front of the line in terms of being that third running back with the performance he had and showcasing that long speed on a couple of runs against the Titans, which was really the only thing that the run game was able to contribute. Was if Nathan Carter wasn't busting the long run, they weren't doing a whole lot. But David Sills, the fact that David Sills got 2 quick catches on the opening drive, and then basically didn't play any offensive snaps. Didn't even finish the drive. Like the Falcons were like, "We're good. We don't need to see you anymore." And then he did get later in the game. He did get some opportunities on special teams, and then Raheem Morris sort of confirmed when he was asked directly about that, like why was that the situation? He was like, "We wanted to see him on special teams." And like, Raheem, why would you want to see a backup wide receiver on special teams? Because if David Sills does wind up making this roster as potentially the 7th wide receiver that I think Tori hinted at earlier, you're going to be playing special teams. And so they want to sort of see him get that opportunity. So to me, those were the kind of 2 guys that stood out to me. If we're going to say anybody won on offense, it would be Nathan Carter and David Sills.
And for you, Jarvis, your winners on offense, defense, special teams.
I'm going for a winner. I'm not necessarily going to speak about it in the sense of winning a roster spot per se.
No. Yeah.
But I would say I feel like Braylon Trice won because he was abusing tight ends. If he was lined up over a tight end, I'm talking about like I just saw the tight end head down and he back in the backfield. Like man, this could potentially be a guy that you bring in on base at outside linebacker for a run-heavy team. Now you're talking about being an asset for Jeff Olbrick, right? Because what if James Pierce Jr. can't whoop a tight end and do what he's supposed to do against a tight end and on early rundowns? Hey, 48, come on in. We know what you could do. So that's the type of stuff that I'm talking about when it comes to this preseason. I will continue to harp on this. There's an opportunity there because nobody was checking for Braylon Trice once they brought in James Pierce Jr. and Jaylen Walker. Nobody was barely talking about it. We had to force ourselves to talk about him, and get into that conversation. So now I feel like he's entered the chat, T. If I can use one of your T-isms, like he has entered the chat in that base 3-4 outside linebacker. We having issues stopping the run. We can't beat a tight end when he's lined up in that lineup in 12 personnel. Man, bring on 48 because he is the quintessential from a size standpoint, as far as size and weight, 6'3", 6'4", 260, 265. Like, yeah, that's ideal right there. So I think, he played his way into being one of those guys where it say, okay, y'all can't stop the run on first and second down. All right, 48. Yup.
Indeed. And I gotta say, when you think about sort of like you all said, when we think about the winners, it's not so much, but we'll get to that in a minute, not so much about the roster piece and whether or not they make it, but just, hey, you had a job to do Friday night. Did you win at when those opportunities were given to you to win? And it sounds like those guys were pretty consistent, because I agree with you guys on all of your selections in terms of who hit. Now, then you've got the flip side. And let me throw this out here because I keep seeing mentions. So I'm going to throw it out there more so as a miss, because the miss may be that you just weren't there. And where my mind kind of went with that, in all honesty, is, and I know you're going to love this, Jarvis, Troy Anderson, because we keep getting questions of Troy Anderson. Where was Troy Anderson? What's he up to? What's going on with him? But if you really think about it, guys, it's not just Troy Anderson that maybe was a miss Friday night because he wasn't available, but there are some other guys that we got to watch out for too, just in terms of what's going on with them and their injuries. So, for example, Keith Taylor, Kobe Bryant, back at practice. Maybe that's a good look for them as they get ready for Friday night. But then you think about Carlos Washington dealing with the hamstring. You guys mentioned Clark Phillips III earlier, dealing with the ribs, and even Storm Norton dealing with the lower body this week. So I'll kind of challenge you, Free, to say, when we say who missed or who didn't hit Friday night, it could be a guy that you were disappointed in his performance, or a guy who you're disappointed because there's no performance at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it, T, with some of these guys that we probably entered the summer being like, oh yeah, that guy's definitely making the team. Storm Norton, Clark Phillips, Troy Anderson, and then availability is the best ability, and those guys have not been available at this point in time. Feels like the writing has been on the wall for several weeks now that like they're not getting Troy Anderson back anytime soon. So it's just like, to me, I told this to Jarvis a couple of weeks ago. Like, next time we talk about Troy Anderson will be the first time we talk about Troy Anderson at this point in time. and until we get an update that says, oh, he's back.
Yeah.
Right. Out of sight, out of mind at this point in time. And then, Jarvis and others have talked about it. Like Clark Phillips as a guy, like, is this his last hurrah in Falcons training camp? So it's like, and then with Storm Norton, it's like we've seen Storm Norton the last 2 years be very productive when he's gotten opportunities on the field. Mm-hmm. But if he's not available, then I think the Falcons are going to need to go shopping for a new offensive tackle, because as much praise as I've given Jack Nelson on this show for showing some positives, Jack Nelson ain't ready to play in the NFL, right? That you might as well just, throw Kirk Cousins out there if Jack Nelson has to go into the game, because Michael Penix is going to die. And so you need to sacrifice somebody at the quarterback position. So like
we talk about sacrifices, folks. On the
I had to go to a dark place, because that's how bleak it's going to be if Jack Nelson has to play snaps in the regular season, right? Get all these preseason reps out the way, Jack. Do you? And then if you're on the roster, you get a red shirt. Hey, Jack, just be in the film room, show up to practice, but you ain't playing football this year. We will do everything in our power to prevent you from playing football this year. So I say all that, right, is to basically say, if Elijah Wilkinson doesn't step up, because it seems like Brandon Parker's dropped down the list. If Elijah Wilkinson doesn't go out here and ball against Dallas, and Storm Norton's not coming back, Falcons need a swing tackle. Storm Norton was the guy that solved this problem 2 years ago. Now it's back. And so that's what's potentially at stake with some of these guys not being available, where it's just like, do we need to go out there and bring in some guys that can do your job, because you're not out there doing your job?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm going to go with a guy that had a lot of hype, momentum coming into the training camp, and that's Nick Nash. And the one thing about, I feel like when people have to look at, or front office personnel guys look at, when like what are some of the other things that you can do besides catch the football, right? We know Nick Nash put up ridiculous numbers, coming out of college, right? Can you block and run situations? Because you're not good enough for us to have you in the game when we're passing the football. Nobody ain't that good. Well, Jamar Chase might be, Justin Jefferson, all those guys. But we're not on that level. It's not the conversation we're having, sir. So I think there were some opportunities for him to kind of take advantage of that and add to the conversation to potentially be on the practice squad, right? Because essentially that's where he kind of falls in my eyes. And I feel like he just missed out on an opportunity to do it. And there were some times where he missed a block and it was his man and everybody else was blocked up. All he had to do was just get in front of him, and Nathan Carter was probably going to be off to the races again. So, a lot of times people, blame the offensive line not blocking, but, that was the wide receiver motioned in, and he was supposed to kind of come up in and lead up and cut off that backside backer, and he didn't do that. And he knew he had messed up too as soon as he popped up. So, he got, how it is, people clap their hands. They're like, oh, man, dog, I missed that one. But yeah, like you can't miss those type of things. And on the exact opposite end of that, Chris Blair not getting the ball, seeking, destroying, trying to find somebody to mix it up with. He understands that because he's been around, he's been in the camp with the Falcons, and he understands what they want the wide receivers to be able to do, and that is block. So I think that he missed on an opportunity to try to really put himself in the conversation and at least be on the practice squad.
Yeah. Chris, did you give me your special teams miss, or were there no misses on special teams?
No, like I like everybody that I saw on special teams, whether it be Bradley Pinion, whether it be Billy Bowe, he was out there. I'm talking about screaming down the field on kickoff. Josh Thompson, I thought he showed well. It was just a lot of guys on special teams just getting after it. Like people are really trying to make this team. Marquise Williams I'm sure he's going to have the time of his life when it comes cut down time. Like, yep, y'all don't want him. Let me get him. I need that right there. He needs to be on my 11 right there. So yeah, I absolutely love what I saw on special teams on Friday.
And I have to say, this takes me back to Friday night and a comment that we addressed that came from one of our viewers who said that he didn't kind of see that energy. He felt like maybe the Falcons were flat. And you know how sometimes we go back and we look at the tape or we'll watch some highlights or whatever, and it's like, yeah, no, I don't think they were flat either. I think, Jarvis, you just hit the nail on the head. There were some guys out there who were going for it. Like, look, I know that 53-man roster is looming on Tuesday, August 27th, and I want to be here. And they were showing those things. We also saw some things that Jeff Ulbrich mixed up, just where he placed people and kind of what that looked like for those players this week as opposed to last week. And I think, too, it may be more of the recency effect, but you got to give so much love to what you saw in the second half in particular. I felt like on all sides of the ball, like everybody, if there was a little, and I didn't feel like there was, but if there was a little layoff for anyone, it would have, in the first half, everybody seemed to come out in that second half with like just the energy that that you needed to see. Real quick before we go, because we did give this love to Jeff Ulbrich and we talked a lot about Marquise Williams and what he was able to do in putting players in certain positions to succeed. Anything stand out for you guys real quick about Zach Robinson and what he schemed up this past week?
Well, remember TJ Yates was actually calling plays.
I'm sorry, yes, TJ Yates, because we called out that he was he was on the sidelines, I think, and Zach was in the booth.
Yeah, TJ was in the booth and Zach was on the sidelines. But
so,
yeah, there were things in the offense I was like, that's exactly what I saw last year from Zach Robinson. Some of it was good, some of it was bad. I was like, but at the same time, it's like I thought TJ Yates did a competent job calling plays. I don't know if his quarterbacks always executed the concepts that he was drawing up in this game. So I think it was less a play calling issue and more just a simple execution issue.
Yeah, and for me, I think there were times where the Tennessee Titans, it seemed like they may have gotten a little message saying that, hey, we got a new guy, OC, so we just gonna stack the box. They had 8 in the box, sometimes 9. I was just like, hey, man, do an audible, give them an option or something, and try these boys. It was almost like, hey, man, they were daring them to throw the football down the field. So, of course, first time calling plays, as far as with the Falcons this year, it was fine. But, when you recognize certain things like that, I know we're not game planning and all that stuff. You got some man beaters. I'm sure you got some man beaters in your play call, in your play sheet. So, use them, use those things because, hey, it's a preseason. Like, anybody gonna get mad at you if you take a shot down the field on first down because they got 8 folks in the box. I ain't tripping.
Indeed. So, yeah, I was thinking about that, and I'm glad, Free, that you clarified that it was TJ Yates who was really kind of running the show, but wanted to just, again, talk about what you guys thought and what you saw in what TJ Yates with a little bit of support from Zach Robinson, what they dialed up Friday night. Thanks to our everydayers for making the Falcons Squad Show your first listen of the day. Be sure to stop by Locked on Falcons with Aaron and his frequent guest analyst, Jarvis, as your second listen, and check out some of Tori's work at AtlantaFalcons.com. We'll see you next time.